In the winter of 1942, on the banks of a frozen river, an army of 500,000 men marched into a trap of their own making. They came to take a city that carried a dictator's name. Many of them would leave only as prisoners. Most would never leave at all. This is the story of Stalingrad, the battle that broke the myth of Hitler's invincible army and turned the tide of the Second World War. By the summer of 1942, Adolf Hitler's armies controlled more of Europe than any power in a generation. But the war in the East had not gone as planned. Moscow had held. The Soviet Union had not collapsed. So Hitler changed the target. His new plan, Case Blue, aimed south, toward the oil fields of the Caucasus, the lifeblood of any modern army. And to protect that advance, one city on the Volga River had to be taken and held: Stalingrad. It was not just a city, it was a name, Stalin's name. And for Hitler, capturing it was no longer only a strategic goal, it became a personal contest of wills with his enemy across the front line. On August 23, 1942, the German Sixth Army, under General Friedrich Paulus, reached the outskirts of the city. That same day, waves of Luftwaffe bombers turned Stalingrad's wooden districts into fire and its factories into rubble. Tens of thousands of civilians were killed in a single week. What had been a functioning industrial city became a landscape of broken concrete and burning streets. But the rubble did not clear the way for the Germans. It became the enemy's greatest weapon. The Soviet 62nd Army, commanded by General Vasily Chuikov, made a brutal calculation. Keep the front lines so close to the Germans, sometimes across a single stairwell, a single wall, that German artillery and air power could not be used without hitting their own men. Soviet soldiers called it hugging the enemy. What followed was a kind of fighting the German army had never trained for. Soldiers called it Rattenkrieg, the rat war, fought floor by floor, room by room, in buildings that changed hands a dozen times in a single day. One apartment block, defended for nearly 2 months by a small Soviet detachment, became known as Pavlov's house, after the sergeant who held it. German maps reportedly marked it as a fortress. In the ruins of factories, the Red October Steelworks, the Barricadi arms plant, the tractor factory, men fought inside machine shops where the machinery never stopped running, because the Soviet Union could not afford to stop producing weapons, even as the battle raged around the workers. And from the wreckage, individual names emerged. Vasily Zaitsev, a Soviet sniper credited with dozens of kills, became a symbol of quiet, patient resistance. Proof that in this city, the war had become intimate. Man against man, street against street. By November, the Germans held roughly 90% of the city. It looked, on paper, like a German victory was only weeks away. It was not. While the Sixth Army bled itself dry fighting for rubble, the Soviet High Command was building something far larger, out of sight, to the north and south of the city. The flanks protecting the German position at Stalingrad were not held by German troops. They were held by Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian divisions, allies of Germany, but poorly equipped and thinly stretched across hundreds of kilometers of open steppe. On November 19, 1942, the Soviet Army launched Operation Uranus. 2 massive armored pincers struck those weaker flanks simultaneously, tore through them within days, and raced toward a meeting point far behind the German front line. On November 23rd, the pincers closed at the town of Kalach. The German Sixth Army, over 250,000 men, along with attached Romanian and other Axis units, was completely surrounded.
The hunters had become the hunted.
The Germans called it Der Kessel, the cauldron. A pocket of frozen steppe and ruined city, roughly the size of a small country, where an entire army now waited for rescue. Hermann Goering promised Hitler that the Luftwaffe could supply the trapped army by air. It was a promise the German Air Force could never keep. The Sixth Army needed several hundred tons of supplies each day just to survive. On its best days, the airlift delivered a fraction of that. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein organized a relief force, Operation Winter Storm, to break through to the trapped army from outside. It came within roughly 48 kilometers of the pocket in mid-December, close enough for exhausted German soldiers inside the Kessel to almost believe they might escape. Then Soviet counterattacks elsewhere on the front forced the relief column to fall back. The last real chance for the Sixth Army was gone. Inside the pocket, the temperature fell to minus 30 degrees Celsius and lower. Rations shrank to almost nothing. Men ate horses that had already starved to death. Frostbite, typhus, and starvation killed as many soldiers as Soviet bullets did. Hitler forbade any attempt to break out or surrender. The army was ordered to fight to the last man and the last bullet.
On January 30th, 1943, Hitler promoted Friedrich Paulus to the rank of Field Marshal. It was a message without words. No German Field Marshal had ever surrendered. Hitler expected Paulus to take his own life rather than accept capture. Paulus did not. On January 31st, 1943, he surrendered what remained of the southern pocket of his army to Soviet forces. 2 days later, on February 2nd, the last German units in the northern pocket laid down their weapons. The Battle of Stalingrad was over. Of roughly 91,000 German and Axis soldiers taken prisoner in the final surrender, only a small fraction would ever see their homes again. Most died in Soviet captivity in the years that followed. Counting both sides across the full battle, the human cost of Stalingrad ran into the hundreds of thousands dead, wounded, and missing, among the highest of any single battle in human history. Stalingrad did not end the war, but it broke something that could not be repaired. The belief, inside and outside Germany, that the Wehrmacht could not be stopped. From this point on, the German army in the East was fighting to survive, not to conquer. Every conflict has a cause, every border has a cost, and every war leaves something behind. Stalingrad left behind a city in ruins, and the moment historians now mark as the turning point of the Second World War. If you want more untold stories from history's deadliest battles, subscribe to War and Military History and turn on notifications so you never miss the next documentary. War and Military History brings you real, researched stories from the battles that shaped our world. No myths, just history. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next documentary.